Well, hey there, friends. I'm your host, Penny, and this is Criminally Nerdy. Hello, my favorite humans. How are you all doing today? I hope everyone is all right in the wake of Hurricane Helene. We had some pretty wild wind up here in Indiana. Definitely not what we're used to in the fall, but I am surely not going to complain compared to what others have had to deal with. So, we finally named the front yard skeleton. It came down to Captain Catherine Janeway from Star Trek Voyager. Fun fact, her character hails from Bloomington, Indiana. Or Louise from Bob's Burgers. Because I can tell there's some mischief in her spirit. My wife was the deciding vote, so we went with Louise. Louise took a tumble with the winds that blew through last week, but we've got her back up on her feet. She needs to be prepared for tornado siren season anyways, so it was the push we needed to get her staked down a little more securely. In podcast world, I wanted to say I am so sorry that I wasn't able to get this out to you all last week. I cannot tell you all how frustrating it is that the one thing I want to do is the thing that has to take a back seat when other things come up in life. If I could, I would just quit work and sit here researching and writing and bringing you content as often as humanly possible. But these damn bills are like, no, you have to keep working. Life is so demanding, isn't it? Don't worry. I have faith that we're going to get there someday. Until then, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, and we're going to have a damn good time doing it. I also want to remind you that you've got less than a week to enter the giveaway for the limited edition Criminally Nerdy t-shirt. It's super simple to enter. Just leave a 5-star or write a review wherever you're listening, snap a screenshot, and shoot it over to me via DM on social media, or send it to criminallynerdypodcast@gmail.com. That's it. You're entered. You can enter as many times as you would like, so rate and review on any app you're listening on. Use your friends' apps, your families, your coworkers. It'll be a super unique way to let them know where they can find the kind of weirdness that only Criminally Nerdy can provide. The contest ends on October 13th, and then I will be putting all of the names of those who have entered into my little coffin and draw the name of the lucky winner. This episode is airing on October 7th, which is National Inner Beauty Day, National Bathtub Day, and National Frappe Day. So, call into work. Celebrate your inner beauty by treating yourself to your favorite frappe and enjoying a nice, long, hot bath. It's also National Peaceful Communication Day, National Propane Day, and National Chocolate-Covered Pretzel Day. So if your boss is determined that you need to join for the Monday morning shenanigans, suggest that they should join in their own self-care regimen by going home, grabbing themselves some chocolate-covered pretzels, and binge-watching their favorite assistant manager of Strickland Propane do his thing. Peacefully communicate to them that all seasons of King of the Hill are available for streaming on Hulu. Today, we're diving into a case that started with hope and love, but ended in bloodshed, betrayal, and a search for answers. Inside the home of a young man with a bright future and his girlfriend, a young woman with big dreams, something went horribly wrong. What should have been a time of celebration for the two and their families quickly descended into murder and suspicion. The investigation that followed was narrow in its scope, slow in its progression, and labeled by many as mishandled by law enforcement, leaving the loved ones desperate for justice for far too long, even though the answers were right in front of them the whole time. This is the case of Heather Quan and Ryan Waller. Some of my sources for this case were WeirdTrueCrime.com, ParanormalCatalog.net, the podcasts Crime Salad and Generation Y, and the State vs. Carver transcripts. 2006 was getting ready to come to a close, and couple Heather Quan and Ryan Waller were preparing to spend the holidays together. They had been together for about 8 months, and Heather had recently moved into the house that Ryan rented and shared with his roommate, Alicia, in Phoenix, Arizona. At just 21 years old, Heather was already on a path towards success. She started at Glendale Community College before transferring to Arizona State University, where she was preparing to attend law school with the goal of becoming a prosecutor. It was clear that Heather had a deep passion for justice, but her caring nature extended far beyond the courtroom. She had volunteered for the Big Sister program, and those who knew her described her as strong-willed, but also incredibly empathetic, always sensing when someone needed a friend and offering support without hesitation. Her future seemed filled with promise and the kind of purpose that could change lives. 19-year-old Ryan had just graduated high school and was already a bright and promising young man. He was incredibly close with his family and had a natural love for music. In fact, he taught himself to play guitar when he was just 11 years old and could pick up songs by ear. I find that to be just so impressive. Seriously, I have zero musical talent, so I consider that to be a superpower. While it's not entirely clear what his plans for the future were, those who knew Ryan described him as sharp and driven, with a mind full of potential. From what everyone could see, both Ryan and Heather had a world of endless possibility in front of them. On Christmas Day, December 25th, 2006, Ryan and Heather were expected for Christmas dinner at Ryan's parents' house, but they never showed. It was out of character for both of them, so Ryan's parents tried calling. When Ryan didn't answer, they tried Heather, but she didn't answer either. After trying them both several times and getting no response, his parents became concerned and decided to drive over to the house to check, telling themselves there must have been some sort of reasonable explanation. Unfortunately, their concerns were not alleviated when they arrived. When they got to the house, they noticed it was dark. All of the lights inside were off and the garage door was closed. They knocked on the door, rang the bell, and even tried going around the back, but got no answer. They knew in their gut that something had to be seriously wrong. Neither Heather or Ryan would have just no-showed on Christmas or taken a last-minute trip without letting someone know. So Ryan's parents called the Arizona PD at 7:50 p.m. to do a wellness check. Now, I can't say much about this because I truly don't know what the average response time is for a wellness check. I don't know what the priority is for a wellness check. I don't know how busy Christmas Day was. What I do know is that it took over 4 hours for Arizona PD to arrive, so we're now into the early morning hours of December 26th, 2006. At some point during the 4-hour wait, Ryan's parents left to grab some coffee or something to eat or something. During that time, Alicia came home, unaware that they were looking for Ryan or Heather or that anything was wrong. And this is where reports start to vary. Some reports say that when police arrive, Alicia let them in the house. Others say that when they arrived, they noticed that someone was lying on the couch and appeared to be unresponsive, so they entered the home. Others say that they saw an unresponsive person on the couch, but waited for an hour for a warrant to be issued before entering the home. Either way, eventually, they were able to get inside. And what they found not only shocked and confused them, but permanently broke the hearts of 2 families. On the couch, they find Heather Quan dead from a single gunshot wound to the head. They find Ryan, however, alive. And this is where Alicia comes back in, and reports vary. If Alicia didn't answer the door, why didn't she? One version says that she simply didn't hear the knocking. Another is that she did hear the knocking and assumed Ryan would answer, because there are no conflicting reports about the fact that when she arrived home, she saw him. She told investigators that she passed him on her way to her room, and she had no idea that anything was wrong. Ryan was pretty out of it, and not only had blood on his face, but had one of the worst black eyes I have ever seen. It was not the black eye you imagine when you think of a typical black eye that looks more like a bruise. It was black and swollen shut. It looked like someone beat the hell out of him. But Alicia couldn't see any of that because the house was pitch black. It took law enforcement absolutely no time to form their theory that this was some sort of domestic dispute gone wrong. They assume that Ryan killed Heather in the midst of an altercation. Based on his behavior, they may have also theorized that he was under the influence of something, whether it be drugs or alcohol. Authorities immediately placed Ryan in the back of a patrol car and began to process the scene. They quickly realized that Heather had not been shot recently. She had been dead for a couple of days. One of the most important things they needed to locate was the weapon used to kill her, but they couldn't find it. Ryan's parents were incredibly distraught, but authorities would not allow them to speak to their son, who is now a murder suspect. Medics arrived on scene, but since Ryan was already in the patrol car, they were not able to see or assess if his disorientation was chemically induced or connected to the injury he had sustained. Ryan sat in the back of that patrol car for 4 hours before he was taken to the station for interrogation. I will warn you that the full interrogation video is out there, but I caution against watching it because by the end of this episode, it will only make you want to break something. Ryan's clothes were taken as evidence and he was given a white jumpsuit to wear. He was barefoot and visibly heavy with exhaustion. An officer came into the room and took swabs from the bottom of his feet. As the officer was working, Ryan stressed to him that all he wanted to do was go to sleep. The officer mentioned that he should see a doctor about his eye. Ryan was barely able to register this, and he said, "Is it that bad?" And then he says again that he just wants to go to sleep. The officer tells him that if he has a concussion, he shouldn't go to sleep, and that doctors would tell him the same thing. Ryan is wincing and groaning and just clearly struggling. After the officer steps out, Ryan continues to shift in his seat until he finally just lays his head down on the table. Finally, around 5:30 in the morning, Detective Dalton comes in to begin Ryan's interview. He asks Ryan if he knows why he's there, and Ryan says no. He's still shifting back and forth in his seat while Detective Dalton reads him his Miranda rights. Even though I'm going to summarize the rest of this interview, it will probably seem tedious and repetitive at times, but I think it's important for you to realize that this is what Ryan was going through. Detective Dalton begins asking basic questions. He asks Ryan his highest level of education, and Ryan says, "I don't know, 8th?" Dalton asks if he graduated, and Ryan says yes. Dalton asks if he received a GED, and Ryan tells him that he doesn't know. When Dalton tries to clarify, Ryan continues to say that he doesn't know, he just wants to go home. Dalton continues and asks what's the highest grade Ryan completed, and Ryan says B. Dalton says, not grade as in letter, grade as in high school. Do you know how to read and write, Ryan? And Ryan says yes. The interview goes on, and I'm not even a trained professional, and I can tell that Ryan is in a very clear state of confusion and in a tremendous amount of pain. He's putting his feet up and down from the chair, from the table to the floor. He is moaning and groaning while cradling his head. Detective Dalton asks Ryan if he has a girlfriend, and he says no. Dalton then asks if he knows a girl named Heather, and Ryan says yes. But when the detective asks questions like, how old is she? What's her last name? How did you meet her? Ryan's answers are strange. He says she's 16 or 17. He doesn't know her last name, and that he knew her from school. He said, she used to be a business name. She used to be in a book. Drawing on this, Detective Dalton asks, she used to be in your business class? And Ryan just says, uh-huh. Dalton moves on and asks Ryan what happened to his face. Ryan tells him that he doesn't know. Dalton presses, saying, well, you told an officer a minute ago that someone hit you. Who hit you? Ryan says again that he doesn't know. Then he says it was Heather and that it was an accident, but he forgot why. And then he says it happened while Heather was helping someone named Christina with her hair. Now, to be clear, there is no way the damage caused to Ryan's eye was caused by an accident. Not a chance. Not unless someone accidentally hit this poor man in the face with a bat. When Detective Dalton asks Ryan if he knows someone named Alicia, Ryan says no. Detective Dalton says, "She lives at your house," but Ryan says no. Ryan is so disoriented that he doesn't remember that he has a girlfriend, what her age is, what her last name is, that he has a roommate or what her name is, how his face was maimed, or that he even graduated high school. I would like to know how it's possible that this interview is even ethically taking place. Seriously, explain it to me like I'm 5. Dalton decides it's time to cut to the chase, so he asks Ryan what happened last night. Ryan says he doesn't know. Dalton asks him almost mockingly, "You don't know?" Ryan says, I really don't. I just want to go to sleep." Dalton says, "Well, you remember Heather hitting you in the eye." Ryan says he just went to sleep after that. Detective Dalton keeps asking questions, but Ryan isn't giving any kind of straight answers. He's mostly saying he doesn't know and he just wants to go to sleep. But it's not in the evasive way you see when someone is trying to course correct when they know they've been caught. You can hear the desperation in his voice, like he's struggling to remember and he's trying so hard to answer this man's questions. But he just can't. Dalton presses again, asking if Ryan doesn't know or if he doesn't want to tell him. Ryan gets understandably agitated, saying over and over that he doesn't know and he just wants to go to sleep. Dalton gets firm and says, "Well, you're not going anywhere." Dalton asks Ryan if he knows what happened at his house, and Ryan says no. Ryan actually turns to him and asks him what happened, and Dalton says that's what he's trying to find out. Ryan continues to say he doesn't know and he just wants to go to sleep, over and over. Dalton asks Ryan if he remembers what happens to his nose because there's a big chunk missing out of it. Ryan says he can't remember. Dalton asks if Ryan did that to him, and Ryan responds, "She probably hit it on something." Dalton is fed up with not getting answers, so he point blank says to Ryan that there is a dead girl in his living room. Something about this comment gets Ryan to break through a little bit, and he says, "Heather? The girl on the couch is Heather?" Dalton says, "Yes, it's Heather, and she's dead." This is when Ryan brings in some new characters. He said, "Well, these people came over, Richie and his dad, shooting bow and arrow and darts at me and her with those. It was just me and Heather that was there. Richie and his dad tried to break in through the back." Dalton asks follow-up questions like, who are Richie and his dad? Through several more I don't knows, Ryan is able to get out that Richie used to live in the house and that actually he and Heather had been shot with revolvers, not bow and arrows. And when he says this, Detective Dalton asks, "So they shot you? Where?" And Ryan says, "I got shot in the eye." Dalton asks what happened after that, but Ryan again says he doesn't know. Dalton gets snarky again and comes back with, "You don't know a lot, Ryan." And Ryan is just totally exasperated and says, "I really don't." So Dalton asks him directly if he shot Heather, but Ryan says no. Dalton presses Ryan to tell him what really happened and tells him that he doesn't believe him. He points out that he's all over the board and that this story about being shot in the eye is unbelievable. He goes so far as to ask Ryan if he was shot in the eye with a BB gun, but Ryan says no, it was a revolver. Dalton says, "If they shot you in the eye with a revolver, you wouldn't be talking to me right now. Ryan says, "How do you know?" And Dalton is as cold as can be when he says, "Because most likely, you'd be dead." Ryan tells him that that's what he thought too, and that he just doesn't know. And he says again he just wants to go to bed. He asks what he has to do. Dalton snaps at him, saying, "First, you have to get your feet off of my chair, and second, you need to tell me what happened to Heather." He repeats Ryan's story back to him and asks if it's true, and Ryan maintains yes. Dalton asks why Richie and his dad would come on Christmas Day, and Ryan says he doesn't know. He's still very confused because at first he says that Richie is Heather's brother, but then he says that Richie is his roommate Alicia's brother. He's able to tell Dalton that he let them in the house and they started shooting. Dalton asks what happened to Heather, and Ryan says she got shot in the face. Dalton asked Ryan where he was when she got shot, and he said, "It was after I got shot, so I didn't even hear anything." Dalton then says, "So you got shot first. And what happened? Did you fall to the ground?" Ryan tells him yes, and that he was trying to get up, but he couldn't. When Detective Dalton asks why he didn't call 911, Ryan said he was letting her sleep. Dalton says, "That doesn't make any sense, Ryan." And Ryan comes back with, "I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm trying, I'll tell you anything, just ask me." So again, Dalton asks Ryan why he shot Heather, and Ryan says, "I didn't, I swear. She was already shot once." Through this whole interview, Ryan has been sitting not 3 feet away from Detective Dalton, shifting in his seat, clearly in tremendous amounts of pain, and desperately trying to communicate with him, but having obvious difficulty. Gee, I wonder why that could be. Finally, Detective Dalton asks to see his nose. After looking at it for a second, he leaves the room. And when he comes back, his whole attitude has changed. He removes Ryan's handcuffs and tells him that the fire department is coming to take him to the hospital, and Ryan is again confused. While they're waiting, Dalton is now very interested in who Richie and his dad are. He asks their last names, what their connection to Ryan and Heather are, and why they might have done this. Ryan gives what little information he can, but for the most part, he just keeps saying, "I don't know." Medics from the fire department arrived, and let me tell you, I wanted to jump through my screen and slap the shit out of Dalton myself. He's almost chuckling when he says, "You're not gonna believe this one, but based on my observation, this," and he's pointing to Ryan's face, "is an entry, and this might be an exit, and might be into his eye. He's behaving like he has a serious head injury, which would make sense." Based on your observation? This man has been in your custody for like 6 hours. You've been sitting across the table from him for nearly 40 minutes, and you're just now noticing this. Oh, and he's behaving like he has a serious head injury, and that makes sense? You fucking think? I'm just gonna quote Bad Teacher here. Maybe you should consider doing something else. Like anything else. Like any other job in the entire world. They mentioned this on the Generation Y podcast, and I have to agree, it is a miracle that Ryan didn't give a false confession during this. He was in such a state of duress and trying to give them information as best he could, with Detective Dalton leaning on him as hard as he could, asking him if he was the one who shot Heather. Thankfully, Ryan had enough in him left to know that he wasn't the one responsible for this and was going to give everything he had left to convey to Detective Dalton, who had. Medics agreed that it looked like a bullet had gone clean through and took Ryan to the hospital. Around 7 a.m., Ryan's father received a call that his son was being admitted with a gunshot to the head and was in critical condition. I can only imagine how shocking of a call that was to receive, and their journey was just beginning. When they got to the hospital, they realized that Ryan had actually been shot in the head twice. The first bullet had entered the right side of his nose and exited the left side, shattering his orbital socket. Some of those bone fragments had lodged in his brain. The second bullet entered the left side of his face, and a bullet fragment had lodged in his temporal bone, behind his left eye and in front of his left ear. This had resulted in brain swelling and required emergency surgery. The problem was, an infection had set in by the time Ryan had been admitted. They needed to treat the infection before attempting to retrieve the bullet, so he wasn't able to receive this critical operation until December 28th. The surgery was successful, but Ryan lost his left eye and suffered permanent physical and neurological damage as a result of his injuries. Ryan was in the hospital for 35 days recovering, during which time he was not contacted by law enforcement one time. Probably because they're out there pounding the pavement finding whoever Richie and his dad are, right? In a perfect world, yes. But sadly, our world is far from perfect. Police came to speak with Ryan again 3 days after he had returned home. This time, they were able to get much clearer answers to their questions. Again, this is something that Generation Y mentioned, and I am going to echo, because even if they hadn't, I would have said it. Let's just say Ryan is your bad guy. Ryan did it. Ryan murdered his girlfriend in cold blood. He needs to go away. For good. But from the moment you saw him, you could clearly see that he needed medical treatment. That kind of injury to his face and the disorientation he exhibited are clear signs of head trauma. Why not, I don't know, get him the treatment he needed? Because guess what? If he's your bad guy, he's still going to be your bad guy after he's recovered. You can keep him handcuffed to the bed. Keep an officer posted at the door. Take him from the hospital directly to jail when he's done. You don't have to be an asshole just because you think he's the one. And even if he is the one, you don't have to be an asshole just because he's an asshole. Which he wasn't. Look, I know I'm not the nicest person in the way I talk about people who do horrible things, but people should not be denied the things they need, especially when it comes to medical treatment. And had they gotten Ryan the treatment he needed as soon as they found him, like at the scene, not only could there have been potential that the damage he suffered would have been lessened, but you would have gotten clearer answers from him. You wouldn't have unnecessarily prolonged his suffering. You wouldn't have traumatized his family in the process. But no, you had your sights set and you decided, fuck it, we're going to act now and ask questions later. And I understand that in some circumstances, that course of action is needed. I do. But this wasn't one of them. You got him. You had every opportunity to ask the questions like, does he need medical care? Does he need help? And then act later. Arrest the guy. Do what you need to do. Due process. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Ryan was much more clear-headed and able to tell detectives that Richie Carver, who was once a tenant of the house he was renting, but had moved out shortly before Ryan moved in, and his father, Larry Carver, showed up at the house while he and Heather were watching TV. Ryan and Richie had had a couple of run-ins in the past, but not much to speak of. Richie had left some of his things in the house when he moved out, so he'd made a few trips back to the house to pick them up. Ryan had even caught Richie in their backyard once, just kind of snooping around, and he used the excuse that he was looking for his iguana. Ryan and Heather were sitting on the couch watching TV when Richie and Larry came to the back door. They tried to get in, but the door was locked. Ryan went to let them in, but when he saw that they were holding guns, he tried to close the door. Sadly, he didn't get the door closed in time. Richie shot him in the face. While they were trying to push through the door, Ryan was shot again. The second shot sent him to the ground. Once inside, they went over to Heather and coldly shot her in the head, killing her instantly. They then stole several items from the home, including electronics and one of Ryan's guitars. The stolen items were never recovered. Somehow, Ryan miraculously survived being shot in the head twice, but he had severe head trauma. This explained why he didn't understand what was going on when he was finally able to get up, and why he couldn't call for help. In his state of confusion, he didn't realize that Heather was dead and that he had suffered a severe head injury. He thought that she was asleep, and all he really knew was that he had a terrible headache. That was all he could process. Alright, so who the hell are Richie and Larry Carver? Couple of winners, let me tell you. Larry Carver, Richie's father, had previously been arrested 6 times for theft, assault, and domestic violence. Richie also had some run-ins with the law, but they occurred when he was still a minor, so those details are difficult to find. Crime Salad, however, was able to find a prison psychiatric evaluation from 2000 that read, quote, "Richie's moral structure is so weak that his internal control mechanism, his conscience, has no influence over his body. That is, he is able to violate himself and others with the same ease as he is able to take a drink of water. Adding to his weak moral structure is a sense of underlying anger. Finally, Richie is very impulsive. I would rate the potential for Richie to act out in the future in the high-risk range. It is not surprising that several of Richie's referrals involve assault, for he could not care less about the rights of others." The house that Ryan lived in with Heather and roommate Alicia had previous tenants, Eric and Richie. I'm not sure what Eric's relation in all of this is, but it appears he moved out shortly before Ryan had moved in, but he had been the one to kick Richie out. So what made Richie and Larry want to come in and senselessly murder these 2 innocent people? According to a statement from Richie's mother and Larry's wife, Cheryl, the 2 had gone over to confront Ryan about a rumor that was being spread about Ryan pistol whipping Richie. Richie was under the impression that Ryan was the one spreading the rumor. It is unclear if Ryan ever even knew about the rumor, but the pistol whipping incident never happened. There have been some that say Richie made passes at Heather and it made her uncomfortable, so Ryan confronted him and told him to stay away, and it pissed Richie off. There have been others that say Richie was simply jealous of Ryan and the life he had. Whatever the case may be, if Richie and his father only intended to confront Ryan about the rumor, they wouldn't have come armed. It sounds more to me like they came with the intention of robbing him, killing him, or both. Heather, sadly, it seems, was someone they saw as collateral damage, as they couldn't leave behind a witness. Cheryl Carver didn't just tell police about why they went over to Ryan's house. She told them what happened when Larry came home. She told Phoenix PD that on December 23rd, yeah, you heard that correctly, December 23rd, Ryan survived 2 gunshot wounds to the head for days before being found. On December 23rd, Richie and Larry left around 8 or 9 at night to go to Ryan's. When Larry came home, he told Cheryl that he had fucked up. He told her that he had just killed 2 people while with Richie because they both assumed that Ryan was dead and that he needed to get out of there. He asked Cheryl to get the .22 caliber ammo out of his dresser because he needed to get rid of it. After that, he took off for California. Now, this could be hearsay, but Heather's autopsy showed that she had been shot with a .22 caliber bullet. That's one hell of a coincidence. Unfortunately, finding the murder weapon was going to be impossible because they'd given Larry all the time in the world to get rid of the evidence. 3 days after speaking with Ryan for the second time, Richie Carver was arrested for first-degree murder, aggravated assault, burglary, and misconduct involving weapons. Larry Carver, however, was not arrested until February 17, 2007. The 2 were originally going to be tried together, but Richie filed a motion to be tried separately, which the judge granted. During Richie's trial, he tried to use the alibi defense, stating that he had been home with his mother and sister. His sister corroborated his alibi on the stand. His mother, however, had already made contradictory statements to the police about his whereabouts and involvement. When she was on the stand, she first said she didn't recall making the statement, and then she said she had only made the claims in an attempt to get away from her husband, Larry. Kind of a weird move to throw your son under the bus for murder just to get away from your husband, Cheryl. Either way, the jury saw her backpedaling in an attempt to cover up the fact that she had implicated her own son. They also put the detective on the stand who took her statement and Cheryl's friend Brenda, who was with her when she told the police what happened that night. Richie had also attempted to say that Heather had a jealous ex-boyfriend who was probably the one who committed the crime, but no evidence was found to support his theory. The most compelling testimony of all was that of Ryan himself. In June of 2008, Richie was convicted of felony murder, burglary, aggravated assault, and misconduct involving a weapon. He was sentenced to natural life in prison, which is a term I don't see used often, but is another way of saying life without the possibility of parole. Larry's trial was another matter entirely. Because she had invoked the spousal privilege, Cheryl's statements could not be used, and she could not be forced to testify against him. Wait, I thought this is what you wanted, Cheryl. To get away from him? Wasn't that your end game here? It's almost like you were lying. So the state, sadly, was looking at the possibility of having to drop their case against Larry. Though they have Ryan, who is willing to testify, they do not have the murder weapon. Not being able to use Cheryl's statements, the detective who interviewed her, or her friend who was present while she gave the statement, they fear the case is not strong enough to secure a conviction. Now enter Heather's badass family. They were not about to stand idly by and let one of the men who murdered their daughter waltz out of this situation. They worked tirelessly to get HB 1254 passed, also known as Heather's Bill. Under this bill, spousal privilege is not applicable if a spouse voluntarily gives the information to law enforcement. It was signed into law on July 13th, 2009, and it was retroactive. And bam! Charges against Larry were refiled in 2009. Sadly, because of the legalities, it took years of back and forth before he was brought to trial. But he was tried, and a second jury saw exactly what the first saw. Larry Carver was sentenced to natural life in prison on January 25th, 2013. In the midst of these trials, Ryan was faced with battles of his own. Because of the shooting, he had to move back home with his parents and rely on them because of his ongoing health struggles. He was partially blind, had impacted capabilities, experienced memory loss, and suffered seizures. His family sued the Phoenix Police Department in 2009 for $15 million, citing negligence, failure to investigate, denial of medical care, and deliberate mismanagement of the case. Just weeks before the trial, the case was dismissed because an expert for the state said that due to the extent of Ryan's injuries, the delay of treatment wouldn't have changed the outcome. Ryan's family was outraged. They had relocated to Florida, where Ryan's father had consulted with a brain surgeon who had agreed to testify on their behalf, stating that in the case of brain swelling or bleeding, every single minute is crucial. I did find an article that said that the Wallers later refiled and reached a settlement, but I wasn't able to find anything conclusive on that, which, if they settled out of court, that would make sense because it's common to have to sign an NDA. I surely hope they received some sort of compensation for the way Ryan was treated in those critical hours where he needed medical attention, but was denied due to investigators' determination to get a confession from the man who they were sure was the villain of this story, who turned out to be the hero. I am sorry to say, but at the age of only 27 years old, Ryan passed away after a seizure on January 20th, 2016 in Pensacola, Florida. The Wallers could have filed charges against Richie and Larry, but they did not. I can only imagine that since the two were already serving life in prison without the possibility of parole, it didn't seem like something they would want to revisit. I cannot imagine the pain his parents went through having their son's bright future stolen and losing him so young. I hope that knowing their son's strength and sheer force of will brought the two men responsible for this senseless act to justice gives them some solace. I didn't find much about Heather's family beyond them being absolute warriors and getting Heather's bill passed, ensuring that Heather and those in similar situations can get the justice they deserve. They, too, were robbed of a daughter with her whole life in front of her. She was ready to take on the world by storm, and it was stolen from her by two fucking assholes. For what? A rumor? Being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Not being into someone? Whatever the case is, and we will probably never know, it doesn't fucking matter. Because there's no goddamn reason to take an innocent person's life. Richie Carver sits in prison, where he will remain for the rest of his days. Larry Carver died in prison at the age of 70 on June 30th, 2023. You know the line, folks. Rest in distress, asshole. And that, my friends, is the tragic case of Heather Quan and Ryan Waller. That's all I've got for you today, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. If you would like to make a donation to the podcast, there will be a support the show link in the show notes, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/criminallynerdypodcast. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Criminally Nerdy Podcast, Twitter, X, whatever, at Crime Nerd Pod, or shoot me an email anytime at criminallynerdypodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, keep it nerdy. I don't appreciate your lack of sarcasm. Fuckity fuck shit. What is with my voice? Who is calling me? Why? Why would you call me? Don't ever call me. Barbecue sauce. My cat is scratching at the door. He's so mad right now. He wants to get in. He wants to say hello, everyone. Aw, poor Oliver. Motherfucker. That's my purse. I don't know you. That was loud as fuck. No. Motherfucker. I got a tool to remove security tags. Next Christmas is on me. Damn it, Bobby. I didn't like that either. Fuck. No. Shit. Well, didn't I almost get through that sentence? Yes, I did. This is a case. I never know how to respond when a grown man beatboxes in front of me.